Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going deep into the world of SpaceX and space travel, and let me tell you, there's been some exciting news lately.
Definitely exciting, and maybe a little fiery, too.
You're talking about that Starship launch, right? The one that, well, didn't quite go as planned. For those who haven't heard, SpaceX, they're the folks building those incredible rockets to get us to space travel. They had a bit of a setback.
That's right. Starship, their biggest rocket yet, the one meant to take us to the moon, even Mars someday, it exploded during a test flight.
Exploded, yeah. Big boom, lots of smoke, the whole shebang. But importantly, everyone's okay.
Absolutely. Safety is always the top priority. These things happen in space exploration. It's a risky business, but SpaceX is all about learning from these events.
Which is a great attitude for anything, really. Like even learning English.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get things wrong, make a few mistakes, but that's how you improve.
Couldn't agree more. Mistakes are just stepping stones on the path to fluency.
Speaking of which, maybe we can use this SpaceX event to learn some new English words. Words that are useful for talking about space, but also pop up in everyday life.
Sounds good to me. Where should we start?
How about with rocket itself? It's pretty basic, but essential. A rocket is basically a vehicle, but instead of driving on roads, it blasts off into
Space. That's another good one. It's the area beyond Earth where all the stars and planets hang out.
Right, so we could say SpaceX builds rockets to go into space. See, you're already a pro.
And to get those rockets up there, they need a launch. It's like throwing a ball way, way up high, but with a lot more power.
And sometimes, unfortunately, those launches don't go perfectly. That's where our word explode comes in. It means to burst apart suddenly, usually with a lot of force. Not always a good thing, but definitely makes for dramatic news footage.
And when things explode in the air, they tend to fall back down. That's where crash comes in. It means to hit something really hard, usually causing damage.
So to recap our SpaceX story, using our new vocabulary, SpaceX built a rocket called Starship. They launched it into space, but unfortunately, it exploded and crashed.
You got it. And you know, SpaceX is a huge deal here in the United States. Lots of people follow their progress, so this event was big news. It shows just how tough space travel is, but also how determined people are to make it happen.
It does make you wonder, what will SpaceX do next? After all that, what's the next step?
Welcome back, everyone. Glad you could join us again as we delve deeper into the world of SpaceX and their ambitious goals for space travel.
It's amazing to think about how far we've come already. Just in the last part, we talked about the recent Starship launch and how even with the explosion, SpaceX is still determined to learn and move forward.
That's right. It's all part of the process, and it highlights what makes SpaceX so unique. They're not afraid to push the limits of what's possible, even if it means encountering some bumps along the way.
Speaking of pushing limits, let's talk more about the technology behind Starship. What makes this rocket so special, so different from what we've seen before?
Well, for one thing, Starship is designed to be fully reusable, which is a game changer for space travel.
Reusable, like they can fly it again after it lands.
Exactly. Imagine every time you drove your car somewhere, you had to get a brand new one for the return trip. It would be incredibly expensive and not very efficient.
Yeah, that would be crazy. So how do they make a rocket reusable? Does it just land like an airplane?
It's a bit more complicated than that. Starship actually uses a combination of powerful engines and the special landing legs to control its descent back to Earth. Imagine a controlled fall from space. That's kind of what it's like.
Sounds a little nerve-wracking, to be honest. I can't even imagine trying to land something that big from space.
It's a massive challenge, that's for sure. But SpaceX has been working on this technology for years, and they're getting closer and closer to perfecting it with each attempt.
It's mind-blowing to think about the science and engineering that goes into something like that. It's not just about getting the rocket back down in one piece. It's also about making sure it can fly again and again.
You're right. Reusability means being able to turn the rocket around for its next mission as quickly as possible. Think of it like a high-tech pit crew prepping a race car for its next lap around the track. They need to check all the systems, refuel, make any necessary repairs, so it's ready to go again.
It's incredible. Now let's talk about one of the biggest reasons SpaceX is building Starship in the first place, to get us to Mars.
Ah, yes, Mars. The red planet, our next-door neighbor, and maybe, just maybe, the future home for humans beyond Earth. It's a dream that SpaceX has been very vocal about pursuing.
It does sound like something straight out of a science fiction movie. A city on Mars, humans living on another planet. But how realistic is that goal, really?
It's definitely a huge challenge, there's no denying that. The journey to Mars is long and dangerous, and the environment there is pretty harsh compared to Earth.
So what are some of the biggest obstacles to getting humans to Mars?
Well, for starters, Mars is really far away. Even with the fastest rockets we have today, it would take at least 6 months to get there, maybe more. That means packing enough food, water, and supplies for a very long trip for a lot of people.
Yeah, talk about overpacking your suitcase. And then there's the whole issue of actually living on Mars. Isn't it pretty hostile to humans?
It is. The atmosphere on Mars is very thin, which means we can't breathe the air there. And the temperatures can be extreme, going from scorching hot during the day to freezing cold at night. Plus, there's the constant threat of radiation from the sun.
Sounds like we would need some serious technology just to survive on Mars.
Absolutely. We'd need to build special habitats to protect us from the harsh environment, and we'd have to figure out how to grow food and create a sustainable water supply. It's a huge undertaking, but not impossible.
It's amazing to think about all the challenges involved, but also the incredible possibilities that would open up if we could pull it off.
Imagine being one of the first people to set foot on Mars, to explore a brand new world. It would be like the early explorers discovering new continents on Earth, but on a much grander scale.
Now that's an adventure I'd sign up for. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back and explore some more English vocabulary that will help us talk about space travel.
That's a great idea. We've already learned some basics, but there's always more to discover. How about we start with the word orbit? It describes the path of an object, like a satellite or a planet, as it circles around something else in space.
So we could say the International Space Station orbits the Earth.
Exactly. And speaking of the International Space Station, let's talk about astronauts. An astronaut is a person who travels into space, someone who has actually been beyond Earth's atmosphere.
So we could say astronauts live and work on the International Space Station, conducting experiments and observing our planet.
Perfect. Now imagine those astronauts living on Mars someday. They'd need a special place to live, a place that protects them from the harsh environment. That's where the word habitat comes in. It's basically a home designed for living in extreme conditions, like those found on another planet.
Scientists are working on designing habitats for people to live on Mars. How's that?
You're getting the hang of this. And while we're talking about Mars, let's not forget the word planet. It's a large celestial body, like Earth or Mars, that orbits a star.
Mars is a planet in our solar system. See, I'm learning so much.
You are. And since we're talking about the solar system, let's zoom out even further and introduce the word galaxy. A galaxy is a massive collection of stars, gas, dust, planets, basically, a giant neighborhood of stars.
So we could say our solar system is located in the Milky Way galaxy, just one of billions of galaxies in the universe.
That's a great example. And lastly, let's talk about the word universe. It encompasses everything, all the galaxies, stars, planets, everything that exists. It's mind-bogglingly huge and still full of mysteries.
The universe is vast and full of wonders waiting to be discovered. That's a pretty good sentence, don't you think?
I think you're ready to write a science fiction novel. But in all seriousness, learning new vocabulary is an amazing way to expand your understanding of any subject, and space is certainly a topic that sparks the imagination.
I completely agree. Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've talked about rockets, Mars, even learned some cool space vocabulary. But now, let's get a little more, well, philosophical.
It's time to consider the bigger picture, right? The ethics of space exploration.
Ethics, yeah. It's not something you always think about when you see those awesome rocket launches, but it's important.
Absolutely. As we venture further into space, we can't just focus on the how. We need to think about the why and the what if.
So, like, what are our responsibilities to other planets? Even if they're just rocks and dust, for now.
Exactly. It's a whole new way of thinking. For example, one big concern is contamination. What if we accidentally bring bacteria from Earth to Mars?
Like hitchhiking on our spacecraft or something.
Exactly, and that could mess things up big time. Imagine if there's Martian life we haven't discovered yet and we accidentally wipe it out with our Earth germs.
That would be terrible. You'd be like those explorers who brought diseases to new lands, but on a cosmic scale.
And it would also ruin our chances of studying Mars in its pristine state. So planetary protection is a huge ethical concern.
Okay, so no littering in space. Got it. But what about the idea of actually living on Mars? Some people think we should colonize it, make it a second home for humanity.
That's a fascinating idea, but it's also ethically complex. Do we have the right to just settle on another planet, potentially changing its environment to suit our needs?
Good point. It's kind of like You wouldn't just build a house in someone else's backyard without asking, right?
Exactly. And then there's the question of what happens if we find valuable resources on Mars, like rare minerals. Who gets to mine them? Does it become a free-for-all, like a space gold rush?
Things could get pretty Wild West out there, huh?
They could. And that raises issues of fairness, sustainability. Are we just going to exploit other planets for our own benefit? Or can we find a way to be responsible space citizens?
That's a lot to think about. So are there any rules about this stuff, like a space UN, making sure everyone plays nice?
There are some international treaties, but they're mostly focused on things like weapons in space, not so much these bigger ethical questions. It's an area that's still developing as we go further out there.
So it sounds like we need to have these conversations now while we're still early in the game.
Exactly. And everyone can be a part of it. Read up on space ethics, talk to your friends, think about what you believe is right. It's not just for scientists and policymakers.
It's like as we explore the universe, we're also exploring what it means to be human, to be ethical, even when there's no one watching.
That's a great way to put it. Space exploration is a mirror reflecting back our own values and choices.
Well, I think this has been a truly mind-expanding deep dive. From the nuts and bolts of rockets to these big philosophical questions about humanity's place in the cosmos.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you've learned something new, not just about space and SpaceX, but about the challenges and responsibilities that come with venturing beyond our own planet. Keep looking up at the stars, keep asking questions, and keep imagining the possibilities. But always remember that with great power comes great responsibility. And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one making those tough ethical decisions as we push further into the unknown. Until next time, keep exploring.
Thanks for joining today's chat on Your Daily English Spark. If you enjoyed this session and want to keep improving your English, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. What topic would you like us to cover next? Let me know in the comments. And don't miss our next episode, where we'll dive into mastering small talk. See you next time.